Hello, legends. Well, as some of you know, just have a look at this.
There are YouTubers and then there are YouTubers. Let's go and meet Chris, who is specialized in extreme adventures.
I always say you get one life. If you live it right, one is enough. So that's why I'm here. I spend my days as a podcast host and YouTuber. Every year I like to challenge myself with some kind of extreme endurance stunt. So I've ran the length of the United Kingdom. I completed a quadruple distance Ironman triathlon. I gave up one Christmas to run 200 miles around a running track. And this year, here I am. Okay, that's enough about me because I've got a great guest today and I want to be chatting all things about smashing your goals. What is holding you back? Why the excuses? And maybe you haven't made excuses and you want to plan your next trip. And my guest today, Amy, is going to help us with that. Let's go and say hi. Hi, Amy.
Hi, Chris. Great to be here.
Yes, absolutely wonderful to meet you. Congratulations, Amy. Also, I'm just going to get it up on the screen here on your latest book, Runner 13. You're a best-selling author. Please don't be humble. You know, as an author myself, I'm well aware that most people don't sell more than 10 books. So to get the success that you've had, I know the commitment that it takes. So well done, friends. Amy, best-selling author, adventurer, mother, all-round great person. And I just want to needle a few things out today, Amy, so that our audience out there, I still meet people that think running a half marathon is just totally like the limits of human endurance and nothing that they would ever, consider. And this is not a criticism of them. I just think, oh my God, if your life is that blinkered that you can't walk for 13 mile, it's not talking, was it in the Chairman Mao's bloody, was it the Great March under Chairman Mao where they walked like 1,000 miles starving? Yeah. And it shows you how damaged people have become in society. So I wanted to start with that point. Mm-hmm. Where do you think your mindset comes from?
Well, you know what? I think even if you'd spoken to me 10 years ago, you would have been speaking to a different person. I'm a writer at heart. That's what I've been doing. I've been a full-time author since my debut novel came out in 2013. And before that, if you looked at me as a child or through high school, I kind of considered myself a bit of a nerd, a bookish type. I sort of avoided. I grew up in Canada, avoided gym class at all costs. I didn't do much sports, didn't consider myself at all athletic, and I'd kind of, I think, put myself in this little box where I thought, sports and outdoor activity or anything, running, that it just wasn't for me. And so I did for a long time kind of shut myself off from any of those opportunities just purely by thinking I'm just not that type of person. And it actually took going through a big life upheaval, relationship breakdown, marriage breakdown, where I realized that one of the reasons why the marriage didn't work was because we both just saw each other in this very specific way and didn't give any space to grow. And I realized that when we went on the Inca Trail, which is, a 3-day trek to see Machu Picchu. So you have this great reward at the end. And I remember really struggling to kind of climb up this big hill in Peru. and just thinking, what am I doing? I've got a healthy body, I've got all this, and I'm really just struggling to accomplish this. And I found myself wanting to do more and more walking initially. I wanted to see more of the world and what was out there. And my husband at the time was just like, well, that's not you. You're not really a walker. You just want to sit and read or something. And it was just a complete divergence of kind of what who we thought we were as people. And for me, I was sort of in this phase of growth and wanting to explore and kind of challenge myself more and more, and realizing that there was more outside of this like small mindset I had for what I could achieve for myself. And so basically the first thing that I did when we kind of made the decision that it wasn't going to work was I booked myself onto a solo walk. I chose the Kerry Way in Ireland, which is 250 kilometers around the Kerry coastline. Now, it is quite a gentle walk in that you're walking from B&B to B&B, so it's not sort of a harrowing camping experience. But it was the first time I'd really put myself to the test, where I was walking sort of 25 to 30 kilometers a day, and going through this big emotional upheaval, going through divorce, processing all these big emotions. And I realized just how good doing that physical activity was for my mental health, and how it was helping me process all these things and emotions that I was going through. And also how at the end of the day, being tired, having exhausted my body, enabled my mind to rest and to recover and to really start to think about my future in a different way. And from Ireland, I went almost straight away to Nepal, because I wanted to, again, do more of these kind of long distance treks that I'd kind of read about and heard so much about. And it was there that I kind of saw my first big mountain. Manaslu, in fact, is the first big mountain you see on the Annapurna circuit. It's the world's eighth highest mountain in the Himalayas. And I remember seeing that and just being awed, just totally awed and filled with wonder at what there was out there in the world that I hadn't seen, or that I'd closed myself off from, and that might only be visible by using my feet. You can't fly to the top of these places. You have to get there under your own steam. And from there, it was kind of, I just kept thinking, how much further can I go? Can I go? Can I go? And yeah, it just kind of all steamrolled from there. And that's only been, I would say, in the past, well, that all happened in 2017, so the past 8 years. And I've gone on a sort of meteoric extreme endurance version, and kind of been amazed by what I've been able to achieve. And I just think if I hadn't had that mindset shift, if I hadn't just even questioned or began to question the kind of box that I'd put myself in my whole life, then I would never have written these books. I would never have seen the things that I've seen and done the things I've done.
Absolutely amazing. Yeah, it's funny. When I joined the Marines, I ran a mile to just to kick things off. It almost killed me. When I ran the London Marathon, I ran probably about, my first training was about quarter of a mile just around the block. I was a smoker, massive drinker and partier back then, and to say it killed me is an understatement. And yet 6 months later, you're running a sub-4 London Marathon. So I'm just reiterating your point that who cares how hard things are, or just get involved, do it at your pace, and have fun is the main thing. Have fun. Can't wait to come on and talk about Marathon des Sables. I think we've also both expedition to the Antarctic Polar Circle, so we can chat about that as well. Yes, if we can just peel back a bit to childhood here, Amy, I always try to sort of make some links. I had a really turbulent, traditional kind of turbulent upbringing, and I can see really how much that's affected me. Even now at 55, I still have coping strategies to make sure my mental health stays tip top. Do you think there's any sort of connection there between you finding this adventurous spirit and this will to not give up?
Well, I think my parents, when I started, especially when I was climbing 8,000-meter peaks, they sort of questioned whether I'd been swapped at birth because they couldn't really imagine that one of their children would end up doing something like that. But that's not to say that, there have been other members of my family, my uncle, for one of them, who have had a long history of sort of being a bit more on the adventurous side and sort of someone I looked up to. But my parents themselves, I mean, I had a very loving childhood, but I would say I had a childhood that wasn't very focused um, on physical activity. They provided me with everything and lots of books. Obviously, I was hugely into reading as a child. But neither of my parents are athletic in any sort of way. It wasn't really a priority for them, and they were both healthy, but not definitely not. Neither of them were kind of sports people. I mean, my dad played golf or things like that, but nothing. They weren't runners or kind of even former athletes. But my mum is Chinese. She came from, uh, uh, my grandparents were refugees from China to England. And there is definitely a kind of intrepid spirit there. I mean, they weren't conquering mountains or climbing, running through deserts, but there was definitely, a kind of determination and kind of focused spirit that I definitely think, has sort of made its way through to me. And I think they sort of, they, they also were not though when I started doing these kind of things, I was grateful to them because they weren't discouraging. They didn't try and plant fear into me, which I have seen from other parents, oh, you can't go, especially when I was climbing, in the extreme high altitude mountains, which, do have a death rate. There are dangers associated with all of these things that we do. But they kind of let me get on with it while dealing with their own kind of personal worries and fears for me. I remember my dad distinctly, I had the opportunity to call him on a satellite phone when I was at Camp 4 at Manaslu. So into the death zone already, about just over 7,500 meters, sorry, 7,500 meters. Just we'd be setting off for the summit at midnight, but at about 7 p.m. I was able to call him and was telling him everything was good. I was feeling okay and we'll be going for the summit. And, they were very kind of encouraging on the call and sort of wished me luck and everything. But I found out when I got back safely to base camp that my dad said he'd had the worst night of his life, just waiting to hear, just wondering what I was going through and what I was putting up with. But they never imposed that kind of fear on me, and I appreciate that. So I can see why they both think I'm a bit of an outlier from our family, but also they're very proud of me and the things that I've done, and I appreciate the opportunities that they've given me, and that my grandparents and my ancestors to put me in the position that I'm in from. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Times change, don't they? You think
Yeah.
about your ancestors, and they didn't have all this Gucci high tech carbon fiber, Gore-Tex equipment, and they can jet off around the world and do these crazy adventures. Yeah, amazing, amazing. Um, what what do you think then, in general, when you look out at society, with the experience you've got, what do you see? Do you see people hesitant to fulfill their dreams? Do you think, for example, or second part of the question, is it worse for women? Do you think?
Well, it's interesting because I've got two sides to this because I've got the obviously the adventuring and expedition side, and then also the creative side and the sort of novel writing because you get people who who are desperate to be authors or who have a dream of writing a book, and then you get these people who are, would love to get out there and do more adventures, and you sort of wonder what's holding them back. I think what I've found frustrating, or maybe this is the thing that I felt like I've overcome, and I can see, in some of my peers and people that I relate to that they're still kind of in that place. Is that I feel like we're very quick to want to label and identify ourselves, or sort of put ourselves in kind of boxes. Say, oh, I'm this type of person. Even if it's like I'm as simple as I'm an introvert, or I'm an extrovert, or I'm an outdoor person, an indoor, I'm a reader, I'm a runner. That we kind of want to so badly to kind of give ourselves labels as to who we are, when I think actually the reality is that we're sort of, if we're open to it, we can be growing and changing and adapting all the time. And I might say, I mean, the thing that I'm kind of interested in the moment is sort of potentially doing some swimming, or like sort of longer distance, that kind of thing. I've never been a particularly good swimmer, and I could say that to myself. I could say, oh, I don't like the water, I don't like swimming, I'm not a good swimmer. Or I can maybe try it and take that seriously, and give myself the opportunity, and, as you said, have some fun with it, and kind of see where it takes me, and just try not to kind of cut myself off from anything in particular. I hear so many people who tell me, "Oh, I'd never run a marathon. I'd never do this. I'd never do that." And I think, what is the word never? It's so definitive, and it definitely does restrict you. And I think just trying to, I don't know, trying to keep that growth mindset, keep an open mind about yourself and who you are and who you potentially could be, I think is, has, well, for me, it's definitely opened up doors that I never thought would open.
Yes. Yes. So let's come on to some specifics then, in no particular order. Marathon des Sables, very famous, historic race. I think it's in its, 30 odd kind of year.
It's coming up to the 40th next year.
40th year. I think I did the 38th edition. Do you remember which one you did?
I do, because I turned 36 on its 36th edition. So it was 36, so 2 years before you.
Was yours the one that was hit by the terrible stomach bug?
It wasn't. So I was the one that was 4 months after that. So that they ran that one in November or something. It was in the autumn, I think, which was unusual because of COVID. They'd moved it. And then we were the next spring. So we were March 2022.
Yeah, I had a lot of guys in my bivouac who had done that race, and they'd all been on drips to get to the end. Everyone had this horrendous parasite, and they said, everyone was just dropping their pants wherever they were, literally, right out, just because, things were exploding, let's say.
Well, very sadly, someone also passed away on that edition, which is, quite unusual. And one of the people that I spoke to had been the doctor on. He was actually a runner, but his day job is as an emergency doctor, and he was on the scene trying to resuscitate this man who had passed away during that edition. So it kind of put into perspective kind of the dangers and of the race for me.
Yeah, I was stood outside our tent. I say tent, folks. Tent is they call it a bivouac, Berber tent. I was stood outside the tent after the first day of running. So we'd done our marathon for the day or whatever it was. And the guy in the tent opposite me just dropped dead.
Oh my gosh.
And everyone started, things were heating up, and the next thing, a medic turned up and was just jumping on his chest. And I think they managed to revive him, because we didn't hear of a fatality. But I did question that one, because the reports that came back it wasn't just one person that had died. It was 3 people.
Right.
And they were saying that the Marathon des Sables were trying to cover it up, because they'd insisted that everyone had the medical procedure. It was for that reason that I refused to do it. I waited until they didn't insist on that. So I had to wait I was waiting like two years in 2 years in the end. But it's interesting when you see the forums or the Facebook groups. people really do worry about idiosyncrasies, don't they? Kit and food and calories and this sort of stuff.
Oh yeah, definitely. You can get really technical and geeky about it all.
Yeah. Did you how did you go about getting your equipment together? Because it's fairly specialized, isn't it?
It is definitely specialized. I actually put the word out to on one of these Facebook groups because I mean after the mountaineering and everything, I've accumulated so much gear. It's unbelievable. But that being said, none of it was that appropriate for Marathon des Sables. You need a very lightweight sleeping bag. You need very lightweight, or everything has to be, you're carrying it on your back, so you have to take into account every gram, it feels like. And I put on this Facebook group whether there was anyone who had run the race in the past who might be able to pass on their gear, and that put me in touch with a woman who ended up being one of my tent mates on the race. And she and her husband had run in the race the time before, which had been a disaster. Her husband hadn't finished. She did finish that, but they were kind of coming back the year I did it to kind of redeem themselves, or so that he could get the opportunity to finish the race. But I remember going to the expo, which is held in London. So they run a sort of miniature day-long convention kind of thing where people who are experts in the race, and the British kind of team leader, he organized these sort of speakers and kind of samples of food and things like that, so that you could try it out before you ran. And I found that was quite helpful, if sometimes also a little overwhelming, because they also had people who would test your salt levels and things, so that you knew how much salt you needed to take in, and all these heat acclimation specialists. And I mean, I ended up only just going to sit in like my gym sauna for a bit to try and acclimate to the heat, because it's also quite an expensive endeavor to go about it, and to pay out to go to Silverstone or something and sit in a proper heat chamber was just a little bit out of budget for me. So, but I didn't let that stop me. I tried to do as much as possible, with what I was capable of doing, and yeah, obviously tried to test out as much of the gear as possible, sort of on training runs and things, to try and get comfortable. Did make some mistakes, but that made me think, if I was ever to go back again. And it's funny, I kind of thought, oh, I'll never do it again. But I also think, oh, maybe I do want to do it again. Although the race has changed a little bit since then. Um, there are some mistakes that I would change, but I think one of the lessons that I learned from mountaineering was this phrase called "be bothered," and that has sort of really stuck with me. It's a phrase I use in my novel about mountaineering, Breathless, but it's all about being bothered to take care of the small things that are irritating you, so that they don't turn into big things later on down the line, and that's very important in mountaineering.
Yes, we'll come on to that, and I'm going to be getting all the tips off you for my upcoming Everest climb. Yeah, it's a funny one, Marathon des Sables. The year I did it was officially the second toughest year ever, because the time of year they changed it, and it was 52 degrees.
Oh,
There's a big difference between running in 30
huge.
degree heat and
Yeah.
52 degrees. And I made it quite difficult for myself, because I only did 13 weeks training.
Yeah,
So most
challenging.
people they've done 10 years training, and they'd probably do another 10 years if they wanted to get it perfect. I was on a massive alcohol binge, and Marathon des Sables was getting closer. I thought, I've got to I've got to
Yeah.
sort my life out here, and so put my running clogs on, did me quarter of a mile around the block just to make a mark, and then I thought, right, 13 weeks to train for the toughest race on the planet with all these ultra professional runners. What can I do? So first thing is I water fast. So I lost about 1.5 stone of weight. So I didn't have to carry that across the Sahara Desert. Second thing to make people laugh, I booked into a tanning salon
Yeah.
and I used the sunbed a couple of times a week just so that I didn't have to worry so much about the sun cream and all that stuff. Because I didn't want to be in that bivouac at night, sunburn. That to me would be just let's tick that one off the list. And I got my son's, those little step up things they have to reach the sink.
Oh yeah.
Tommy Tiptoe, I think they call them, or something. I put that in a built a sauna, and I put that in the sauna,
Just doing
and then I
steps.
was just doing step ups for an hour in the sauna, and I ran about 10 3-milers, just which is my sort of local route. I ran an 8-miler, a couple of 8-milers. I tried to run a 17-miler, but it was too hard, so I just called my girlfriend to come and pick me up, and that was it. That was it. Then I was off to the toughest race on the planet. But I don't care about that stuff. I just know it's all in your head, and if one person can do it, I can sort of do it. But yeah, I wouldn't recommend that for most people. You want to at least try and get a bit fit. Yes, and it's stunning, isn't it? The Sahara was stunning.
Oh, absolutely. And you really felt like you were accessing places that you wouldn't, there was no other way to see what you could see other than by doing that.
How did you get on with your tent mates?
So I was really lucky. As I said, I'd sort of connected with this woman who'd lent me some gear. Her and her husband were just, I mean, they were quite inspirational to me because they were parents, 3 boys, and they had, when I went to their house, they had these pictures of them in Nepal, and I'd only just come back from Nepal, with their babies kind of in their backpacks doing this trekking, and it showed me that you didn't have to that having a family didn't have to prevent you from going out and doing all these things, that sometimes people warn me. They say, oh, if you have children, you won't be able to do as much, and they were sort of proof positive that wasn't the case. And she was she was an incredible runner, or she is an incredible runner. She'd done the Comrades race in South Africa a few times, and he actually had been a bit injured, so he wasn't the most well trained in the lead up to the Marathon des Sables, his second attempt. But again, he had that same sort of thought as you've got the mental resilience, and that for me also was what had given me kind of I suppose the courage, or the belief that I could do it, is that I felt like, as with mountaineering, I felt like I trained so much my mental game, my sort of mental resilience, that I knew that, although I did try and train as much as I could, I knew that the mental side of it would hopefully pull me through, even if my physical side wasn't, as fit as it could have been, or I'm just never a great runner. I try hard, but that's just not my, but I knew that I could, if I had to walk the whole thing, I would power walk the whole thing, as it was. I did a sort of a mixture. And yeah, it was incredible. And it was an incredible experience. And it also introduced me, one of my tent mates ended up being one of the elite women runners for Britain. I think she came second or third for Britain. And she started a bit after us, so I got to watch her and all the other elites kind of running through. And that's what sort of inspired, or helped to inspire, the main character in my book, because ultra running is one of those forums where women do succeed and do really well. That again, it's sort of the endurance, the mental toughness, and also over huge distances. It becomes less about physical ability and more about, say, mental strength, your preparation, and it becomes almost not luck, but anything can throw you off when it's over 100 miles or plus races. these big ultra marathons that people do. Anything can kind of throw you off. So your nutrition, anything. So it's one of it kind of flattens the the hierarchy in between men and women, especially.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes. Gosh, so much to say. Um,
Well, you hear about Jasmine Paris, for example. She is this incredible female British ultra runner who won the Winter Spine Race, which is this incredible ultra marathon in Britain, which is incredibly difficult because it's run through the Yorkshire Dales in the middle of winter. So you're okay. You don't have the heat of the Sahara, but you have the mud and the bogs and the driving rain and the freezing cold. You have all of these other kind of natural obstacles, and of course the terrain of the Dales is very undulating. You've got a lot of elevation to deal with, and she won that race, set a world record against men and women. So and not only that, but at each one of the stations she was pumping breast milk for her child that had been that she'd only recently birthed. So it was all of these things kind of combining for me to think, oh my goodness, this is like such great stories to tell. And in terms of inspiring my fiction, it was definitely something that I wanted to kind of pour into what would become Runner 13.
yes, I'm showing copies of your book here. We'll come on and talk about the process, your
Yeah, definitely.
writing process. We had this weird thing where I got back to the tent on, I think, day 2, and I'm sat with about 3 or 4 guys, and the tent had about 8, maybe nine people in. And I said to these 2 that they'd run the race before, I said, well, where are the guys? And they just looked at me and went, oh, they failed.
Oh, wow.
I was like, what do you mean they failed? They said, oh, they haven't made the cutoff, Chris. I was like, what? Well, what do you mean? Well, there's a cutoff. They were like, oh yeah, there's a cutoff time every day, and these guys have, and that was it. That was the harsh reality. I just couldn't. But I find these things weird. That the next morning there was this massive queue of people going right down through the camp. We're talking like best part of 100 people, if not maybe 300. I mean, I can't remember exactly. And I said to the guy, "Oh, what are they queuing for breakfast or something? I thought we have to feed ourselves after day 2." And they went, "No, they're going home, Chris." I was like, "What? Why would you go home? It's £7,000 for crying out loud."
Yeah.
You wouldn't. I was just thinking, Amy. I'd have to break a leg to go. There's nothing but it's funny, isn't it? I think, I'd almost guarantee those people are just given up in their mind because the injuries you get, I think you can get through.
Yeah, I mean, when we didn't have the extreme heat on our edition, but we did have a 7-hour sandstorm on the day 2. And I remember we did have a cutoff. In our case, we had a cutoff in the middle of a stage. So you had to reach the base of a jebel. And if you hadn't and a jebel is one of these Moroccan mountains that you kind of climb and cross over the course of the race. And if you hadn't reached the bottom or the start of this climb, then you were going to be out the race. And I hadn't been flirting with the cutoff times, but as soon as the kind of sandstorm came in, the advice that they give you, the official advice that they give you is to kind of wait in place and hopefully the storm will pass through. Because obviously you're navigating at the same time and you don't want to lose your bearing. But I'd been lucky that one of my tent mates had given me a kind of refresher lesson in kind of compass, taking a bearing and kind of reading your compass and following the map. And I decided, you know what, if I stay in place for too long, I am going to get cut off because, I'm going to run out of time. And so even though I had everything, I had my buff all the way up to my eyes, my sunglasses, then my cap, could barely see anything, it was like huddled against the wind. It was sand blasting us. I couldn't even see my hand in front of my face, but I could just about see my compass bearing. And I remember just thinking, you know, In fact, I was kind of laughing because I was like, is this what you're throwing at me, Sahara Desert? Is this what you've got? Is this the test that you're throwing at me, and I'm gonna pass it. And I just kept on going. I was like, as long as I can still put one foot on front of the other, and I feel like, I've got this bearing, and I'm gonna follow it, and it's gonna take me to the right place. I'm gonna keep going, I'm gonna keep marching, and I did have to do that for hours on end until finally, yeah, getting over at the top of the Jebel, and then finally entering the next bivouac. And I remember meeting everyone because I was the slowest in the tent, so everyone was back before me. But like kind of the cheers and the camaraderie, when I made it, it was so great. Really gratifying to feel. And yeah, I was just like, nothing. I'm not gonna. I'm not going to be defeated myself. I'm gonna try everything to get to the end. Even on the very, very last stage, so the final marathon, I was passed by an 80-year-old man. That's how slowly I was going. But as long as you keep putting one foot in front of the other, it's not when in these races, it's not about how quickly you're going. It's just about doing it. It's just about getting across that line, finding your way to the finish, well, no matter what it takes. And that's sort of what I was focused on.
Absolutely. The only thing that was slowing me down, I was a plodder. I wasn't, I'd love to have won the bloody thing, but I don't think that was going to happen. I was happy to, to plod it all. But the thing that was slowing me down was the amount of people passing out.
Oh, right,
You
yeah.
know, you'd be
Yeah,
going
it
up
is
the Jebel, and the guy in front of you would just
just, yeah,
collapse unconscious, and obviously you couldn't just leave them. You had to then, go
yeah,
and give them first aid, and then try and find one of their buddies, and then get the chopper in to chopper them out,
yeah.
and that was. And because I'm that sort of guy that I'm quite conscientious, I wouldn't ever run past someone. I'm not saying you should, but
No,
there were times where there were three or four people stood around someone. I could have gone, oh, he's being dealt with, but I still felt the need to say, do you guys need a hand with, do you want me to run ahead and get someone or whatever? And then you'd find they'd say, oh, could you just do this? And next thing you're thinking, oh my God, this is like the third person I've stopped to help. It's my time's all adding up. Um, I thought it was pretty easy, really, to be honest. It was just the heat was the hardest. The Not just the hardest thing I think I've ever had to experience, um, in sport. I mean, but it the distances was fine. Even running two marathons in the desert, I thought was pretty tame. It was just the heat.
mm,
It was that feeling that if someone came up with an ice bath now, I'd give them £3,000. Just I'd borrow the money.
yeah,
There were cars parked on the route, weren't there? Occasionally you come across a sort of not a checkpoint, but someone standing watch for some reason.
or a photographer or something.
Yeah. And when you went to the other side of the car away from the sun, it was all people
Just
leaning up
sheltering.
against it. And I was like, oh, guys, room for one more, please. And it was amazing how much cooler it was just to get out of the sun. But then you didn't want to leave. The other thing that didn't go in my favor, Amy, was I had stomach infection from day one.
Oh no.
Like, yeah, I couldn't hold. Basically, I threw most of my rations away. I couldn't really eat anything. Took some of that stuff that blocks you up. Yeah, just that would be my. I don't want to go and jinx myself and talk about Everest, but you know what I'm thinking.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't eat much on my 8,000 meter peak. I couldn't hold anything down. But your digestive system is one of the first things to go when you're in high altitude. Um, all of your blood is being redirected to your brain, and your stomach just well, like gives up for a bit. But yeah, I remember Nim's. So I climbed with Nim's Dai, Manaslu, part of his Project Possible. And I remember him saying to me, if you don't eat, you're not going to go any further. So I would be eating and then I would sort of have to turn away and kind of um, throw it up basically. But yeah, it was just impossible to keep anything down. But yeah, except tea, lots of tea, water, hydration, just trying to keep that up as much as possible. And yeah, take in anything that I could stomach. Yeah, amazing.
Yes, let's move on then to your mountain climb.
Mhm.
What's the height then of Manaslu?
8,164, I believe.
Gosh, so it really is an extremely high mountain, up there with the
World's eighth highest.
eighth highest.
Yeah.
And what made you choose that one?
Well, so I had done the Annapurna circuit, which obviously is just a trek, and seen Manaslu. That's the first big mountain that you come across when you do the kind of traditional circuit. And it does look very impressive because unlike Everest, it kind of stands on its own. So Everest is surrounded by, when you go, have you been to base camp? Yeah.
No.
Oh, no. So even when you go to base camp, you'll see that Everest has got, some enormous other mountains around it, Lhotse, Nuptse, and the kind of peak of it just kind of peeks out from behind. But now Manaslu kind of stands on its own, so you get the kind of sheer bulk of it, and there's nothing quite that height around. So it's very impressive from that point of view. And it was, as I said, the first 8,000er that I had seen. And it never even crossed my mind that I would climb it at that point. But when I got back from that trip, I'd been up to, you go over a pass, which is about 5,500 meters. And I found that there were all these high altitude AMS warnings, about altitude sickness warnings as you were going up, and a lot of people were struggling and suffering. And I found myself actually getting sort of stronger as I was going higher. I realized I had quite a good tolerance for altitude. And so when I came back from Nepal, I kind of thought that I wanted to test myself and climb a mountain. And I ended up going to Toubkal, which is in Morocco, highest mountain in the Atlas Mountains, and I climbed Toubkal, which is I mean, again, it's not really much more than a trek, but it is. We summited on New Year's Day in the morning, sun rising over the Sahara Desert, and it was kind of this magical experience that I had that kind of gave me what they call a sort of summit fever. I wanted to see more of that. And the guide on the trip was a man called John Gupta, who's the youngest British man to summit Everest from the north and the south sides. So he's a very experienced mountaineer. And I asked him what it would take for someone like me, who at that time, I'd only climbed Toubkal, I'd only done a trek, I'd only kind of even begun to enter my fitness or, sort of endurance journey the year before. I said, what would it take for me to climb Everest one day? And his suggestions there were three things he said to think about. Well, one of them is finances. Obviously, Everest is an expensive expedition, so you have to have the money to be able to do it. Second one is to test yourself at altitude. So I'm not saying, I know, Chris, you're having quite an unconventional journey to Everest, but the traditional, I suppose, recommendation is that you see how you do at maybe 5,000, 6,000 meters, and then go up to Everest, and see how your body can handle altitude. And then the third one is how you like expedition life, because it is going to be a month plus. I think Everest is actually closer to 2 months living at base camp in quite, I mean, there are some base camps at Everest that are quite luxurious now that I've seen pictures of, but that's a bit too Instagram for me. But traditionally, you're living without running water, very basic food, no showers, you're at high altitude for a long time, and you're with people that you don't necessarily really know that well. So it's how well you can handle yourself on a long expedition, because it is hard on your body and hard on your mind. You're away from family, friends, work, all the traditional comforts of home. So my first attempt then was to try a mountain called Aconcagua, which is the highest mountain in the
South
Americas.
America, yeah.
And because I had had this goal of Everest in my mind, I wanted to trek, or to climb Aconcagua with a Nepali company because I felt like if I could use the same Sherpa or get to know the guides beforehand, then especially as a young woman kind of climbing on her own on Everest, I wanted to feel like I at least knew who I would be climbing with before kind of just jump straight away, jumping on the expedition. So that's how I came across Nims. At the time, he hadn't done his Project Possible. That was still just a dream of his. But he had just started his mountaineering company, and he is this, for people who don't know, he was a former kind of Gurkha and SBS soldier, but who is from Nepal. So he's got these kind of dual backgrounds of Nepal and British. And he had been making his mark on Everest and building his guiding company. And I kind of reached out to him and I said, I'm looking to do Everest one day. I see that you're running expeditions to Aconcagua. I'd love to join. And he said, yeah, please come along. So I went with his team to Aconcagua and we summited that in some of the most extreme conditions that NIMS has ever seen on Aconcagua. Because again, Aconcagua is not a technical mountain, but it is a big mountain and it faces extreme weather, wind, cold. It can be very brutal and the summit rate can be quite low because of that. So even though it's not technically difficult, it can be very challenging and it is very high. It's almost 7,000 meters. But NIMS being NIMS and having that kind of, SBS mindset, he was determined to get us up to the top and we did. We sort of marched through this incredible wind and cold and made it to the top.
How did you, Amy, how did you manage your layers up there?
Yeah.
Because obviously it's difficult to just whip off a summit suit and put on
Yeah.
another thermal or whatever.
Well, we were very lucky to have the summit suits because, in fact, because I had had Everest as a goal in mind, I purchased a summit suit for Aconcagua, even though I would say traditionally that's probably overkill for Aconcagua as a mountain. They don't really suggest that you need a summit suit. You just need an extremely warm down jacket and trousers. But if that's the only mountain you're going to do, they don't suggest you buying an 8,000-meter suit for it. But for the day that we summited, if I hadn't been equipped to that level, I wouldn't have made it. Um, the summit suits, for Aconcagua, I was lucky. Well, I was basically wearing that and just a base layer, so I was able to kind of they're full of ventilation, kind of zips and things that you could use to keep it open. But really, the thing that help propel me to the top when not everyone in our team made it all the way up. Some people did have to turn around too much, but it was being able to keep on top of myself because even though you're with guides, you're with Sherpas, you need to manage your own nutrition. You need to know when you're flagging. You need to know when you need to stop and have water or when you need to refuel or anything, and you're responsible for that. No one's going to tell you now's the time to eat. Now's the time, it's not you're not babied up there or you shouldn't be. And so for me, it was being able to manage myself. As you said, I mean, even a sunburn, windburn up there is really important. So making sure you're still applying your your sun cream and things at various intervals and small things like that can make huge difference in the long run. Because if you do end up burnt, it can just sort of sap your energy and you can just sort of find it more and more difficult as you're getting higher and higher. But mostly it was kind of taking inspiration from kind of from NIMS and the other guides who were kind of pushing on ahead. And I thought, if they're still going, I'm going to keep going. And it ended up being, yeah, I had an incredible time, really. It was amazing experience on that mountain, really challenging, but beautiful and brilliant. And when I got down, Nims was telling me all about his Project Possible and how he was the next year was going to try and break this world record and summit all of the 14 mountains above 8,000 meters in this record time. And he was really struggling with raising money. He talks about that quite a lot. But really struggling to get anyone to sponsor him because it was too wild an idea. And so he was going to bring clients on some of the mountains, and one of those mountains was Manaslu, obviously to help support his expedition. And he said to me at the end, he said, well, why don't you come out and join my team on Manaslu? And so I thought, you know what? Even if I don't make it, even, I'd never really thought I would go out and climb an 8,000er that quickly. Only, a year and a half after summiting my first mountain ever. Um, and I thought, well, even if I don't do it, I'm going to be there for this historic occasion. I'm going to witness something amazing. I'm going to put myself to the test. And I thought, yeah, let's give it a go. So off I went that same year, later on that same year to Manaslu.
Wow. Yes. Yeah, Nims is just showing up. Nims came on the podcast a while back after he'd done his climb.
Hmm.
I think I was the first person to ever read his book because I got sent an advance copy. It was a really, really good book as well. I mean, it was spot on. And then, of course, Kristin Harila came around. This
Yeah.
very petite Sami girl
Yeah.
from the north of Scandinavia, and Nims climbed in all the world's 14 highest peaks in 6 months, which is just incredible. And then she came along and did it in 2 months. Or
Yeah.
so, just going back to what you're saying about girls excel at some sports. I think altitude is one of them.
Well, it was kind of one that I found quite incredible is I was speaking to the Himalayan database after I climbed Manaslu, and they're the people who keep track of summits in the Himalayas. And the year that I climbed Manaslu, I was the youngest Canadian woman to do so. But not only that, I was the sixth woman, Canadian woman in history to do it, and only the sixth British woman, depending on which passport I use. But only six women prior to me had ever done it, ever. And that to me kind of blew my mind because I thought, what other what other activity, adventure can it be where, so few women have ever done it? And I have to say, with the rise of social media and the kind of advent of Everest and the popularity of it, and obviously Nims's documentary and all the documentaries and Kristen and everything, there are far more women entering the sport, and it's incredible to see. But yeah, I remember thinking at the time, just like, wow, this is still quite rarefied air, not just thin air, but quite rarefied air that I'm breathing up here. Not many people, but not many women especially have been up here, and it was quite incredible. And it was one of the reasons, I mean, my novel Breathless, which kind of came about after I climbed Manaslu, it came about mostly because I realized that base camp is kind of the perfect setting for a thriller because it's isolated, it's dangerous, it's full of interesting characters. But also, I realized that I wanted to put more women in in fiction in those kind of arenas. So that's why sort of that my main characters are always sort of um, women in these sports because it kind of you can't be what you can't see. It's one of the things they say, and it's sort of having more and more stories, movies, novels, plays, whatever it is, about women doing these kind of things helps to encourage and kind of show what's possible.
Yes. Do you feel, Amy? Are you sort of pleased that you've had you've done all these adventures and now you're doing motherhood? Is
Yeah, definitely. I mean, but I also don't want necessarily the adventures to stop now that I've become a mother. I mean, obviously things do change and your body changes and your priorities change and you also you have dependents now, so there are other things to think about. But also I think it is important. I mean, I have a son and I've got another boy on the way, and I think it's important for them to see, that their mum is still out there pursuing what she's passionate about and sort of what makes her happy. Happy mum is equal to happy children. So I think it's important to still kind of prioritize things that make me feel good and that can show them that there's how much there is to life. So much so that when my toddler was 1, I took him to Seville with me where because I was learning how to skydive. So he was a little drop zone baby, and I think some people questioned my sanity on that front, but I thought, he's gonna look back on that. He won't remember, obviously, but he'll see photographs of me, you know, learning how to skydive as he's sort of toddling around and show that, he hasn't been, he didn't, he's not responsible for holding me back in any way. And also I'm never going to hold him back either. So
Yes, amazing. That's another thing we've got in common then is skydiving.
yeah.
That is, I watched the film Point Break, the original Point Break with Patrick Swayze and Keanu Reeves.
Hmm.
And I just knew I've got to do this one day.
Yeah.
And I'm what I've always done, Amy, and I suggest anyone do this, is I never say no to anything in my mind. I
Yeah.
say, okay, I might not be doing it tomorrow, but
Yeah.
I am going to do it. And Everest was the big one, obviously. And over the years, just by simply having this mindset that, yeah, it's on the back burner for the time being, but it will come, life's just given me all these amazing opportunities. Skydiving being one. I mean, it's just, it's the most phenomenal fun skydiving,
It
isn't it?
is. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and yet I didn't come from a sort of privileged background or anything like this. We were we were poor growing up. Really, both my parents had to have two jobs to sort of make ends meet. That's when they were together. They very often weren't together, my parents, and so everything I've done as an adult across 86 countries has all just become from this thing. And it's not about money either, because I haven't really earned any much. I'm not one of these people that earns like £30,000 a year and all this kind of stuff. Life's just given me, what I want through mindset, really. So let's just talk about the summit bid then.
Yeah.
Because Everest is famous, isn't it? You get up to Camp 4 if you're going from the Nepalese side. You get a shout round about 9 o'clock in the evening, and it's go time.
Yeah.
And then you're gonna be climbing from anything. As a sort of average climber, you're gonna be looking at anything between 5 hours and I'm guessing 10.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, 2 o'clock in the afternoon is the cut off, isn't it? That's a lot. That's a long time, isn't it? That would be 9 in the evening till 9 in the morning would be 12 hours, and then you're going for another 5, 17 hours. I won't be doing 17 hours, Amy. I tell you that.
No, I mean, I suppose on Everest, it depends with your weather windows. It's so dependent on weather window. And if you're up there with a whole bunch of people who are standing in line waiting, that's the key. I mean, I find those. I mean, Nims took that famous photograph of the kind of queue, but even he and I were talking about it, and it's sort of a little not misleading in any sense because obviously it was that, but the whole idea is it's not like that every day. It's not like there's a queue up to Everest every single day. It just happens that when the window opens, you got to go for it, or it might not open again. That's the kind of the philosophy behind it. Obviously you have to trust your if you're being guided, you have to trust your guide's instinct as to whether that's the time to really make the move and things. And um, yeah, I mean, Manaslu is interesting. It's kind of similar to Everest in that there's an ice fall to get across. So there's a bit of technical climbing. And Manaslu is also, for a long time, had a reputation of being one of the more dangerous mountains purely because there's nowhere to camp on Manaslu that is safe from avalanche danger. So most of the time, if you're in this, I think it's the southern Coombe up to Everest, most of the time, if you're camped there, you're protected from avalanche danger, even if you've got avalanches coming down on either side of you or the earthquake or anything that happens. Most of the time, you're pretty protected. But on Manaslu, they've had historic years where avalanches have wiped out the entire kind of camps while people are sleeping. So the death count on that mountain is extremely high. To the point where some of I think it was Ed Vestier's, one of the top mountaineers in his novel, or not his novel, in his memoirs, recollection would say, he sort of despised Manaslu for that reason because he never felt really safe when he's on it. He just wanted to get up there and down as quickly as possible, and that is sort of that's sort of the way that you try and climb it. I mean, so for me on summit day from Camp 4, we left at midnight because it's not as big a summit day as Everest. Obviously, it's still 700 meters shorter than Everest. But you leave at midnight. And in fact, as I said, I moved for some reason, my body handles altitude quite well. I was moving quite quickly. I was on oxygen as well. But I was moving quite quickly, and my Sherpa, my lovely Sherpas, told me you might want to slow down a tiny bit because otherwise you're going to summit in the dark, which is is fine, but it's not as magical as summiting and sort of seeing the incredible views around me. And thankfully we summited almost exactly at sunrise, so it was quite incredible to watch the kind of sun come up over the mountains and then over the clouds, and you're above you're above everything up there. So it's truly, it was an experience. I mean, it is magical, absolutely incredible. But I made it all, on the way down, I made it all the way down to base camp. And the thing was that we got back down to Camp 4, my Sherpa and I, and there was someone having a medical emergency. So someone having a hypoxic attack. And unfortunately, she ended up passing away. A really tragic case. Someone who was a very experienced mountaineer, uh, having cerebral edema. They managed to get her down as far as Camp 2 before they were, because it's quite exhausting, obviously, rescuing someone. That's why they put the warning out that at these kind of altitudes, rescue is not guaranteed, although obviously it's improved so much. But it's such a physical and difficult thing for even the most powerful and strong Sherpas to deal with and climbers to deal with. So anyway, they managed to get her down to Camp 2, and then she seemed to recover a bit because obviously you recover from hypoxia the lower you get. So she seemed to recover her faculties, senses a little bit. So they decided to rest at Camp 2. In the meantime, any of us who were healthy and feeling good were bombing it down to base camp, and my Sherpa had left to help this woman. So I was actually on my own, like totally on my own, trying to navigate down. And is anyone who's a mountaineer will tell you actually coming down. Getting to the top is one thing, but you've got to get all the way back down safely as well. And that's, after you're already exhausted because you've been climbing for 5 or 6 days, to get to the summit. And coming down, that's when mistakes are made. That's when, you slip, fall, injure yourself, or lose track. You have to try and maintain as much focus as you can until you are properly safe and down base camp. But anyway, so they stopped at Camp 2, and we found out the next morning that she'd gone outside of the tent for a toilet break in the middle of the night, and didn't come back inside. And they found her, she had frozen to death outside the tent. She's never made it back inside. So obviously,
stuff.
really serious stuff. And obviously, as I said, this is someone who'd climbed, she'd done Everest, she'd done Annapurna, she'd done some of the biggest mountains in the world, but you just, with cerebral edema, with altitude sickness, you don't ever really know when it's going to affect you. So yeah, it
Yes.
kind of puts things into perspective, definitely.
When I expedition to Antarctica, I particularly specifically picked an expedition that did scuba diving.
Oh, wow.
And in our very first dive, the girl in the boat opposite me was a Japanese girl. And I looked at her. She was having some sort of challenges, but when you're down there, you're quite focused on keeping yourself together because you for a start, it's Baltic. I mean, it's freezing. Then you've got a dry suit on. Then you've got a huge amount of equipment. Then you've got a different setup to your breathing apparatus than you would do, say, scuba diving in the Bahamas or something. And anyway, me and my buddy were sort of kitting up, and we were chucking each other, and I didn't realise I was the last person to see this girl alive, basically. I didn't understand to the full extent that she was struggling, and she shouldn't have been struggling because you don't go to Antarctica to scuba dive unless you know how to do it and you've got all the safety covered. You need to know what to do. I mean, I got down to 18 meters on one dive, and suddenly I just started breathing in seawater, a full lung of it. And when I went like that, my respirator was gone. It wasn't that all, and in my mouth, I just had the rubber clench bit that you have between your teeth.
Yeah.
And in that extreme cold, the little plastic cuff that they put around the rubber to hold it to the respirator. I'm calling it a respirator. I can't even remember the terminology, but it had shattered. So I was 18 meters down, and I knew the first thing you do is you arm over the shoulder. In fact, no, there was no point doing that because it had shattered. No, I knew the first thing to do was go to the octopus, to the spare, and I grabbed it. And I remember thinking, if this doesn't work, this is it. And I just had an immense sense of calm, and I just took it, blew some air out, blew the water out of it.
Yeah.
And then I wasn't hesitant in tapping my dive buddy and saying, let's call this one. I'm not, I'm not feeling it now. And but yeah, serious happens. I've been on 3 trips now where someone has literally died in front of me. So I kind of take all this serious. I take the safety 100%, but also I've done this for so long now. I've had to face so many people telling me I'm mad, that I'm crazy, that I'm going to die. I rode across the Atlantic in January with my mate. People literally wouldn't have anything to do. They would like, what, you haven't trained for like 10 years for that? I'm like, no, we've been out in a boat a couple of times. I can tell you, Amy, by the time we left Gran Canaria to row to Barbados, we was on point with all of it. Radio procedure, safety procedure, GPS coordinates, the weather applications, map reading, navigation.
How did you know that was on my bucket list, Chris?
Yeah. And the other thing is we were meticulous about clipping on.
Yeah.
Because you've got the best float in the world there. That boat's never going to sink. It can't sink. It's got air compartments in it. So long as you're clipped to it, then, there's still things that could go wrong technically. You could get held under the boat and then you've got to cut free. But there is that thing. When I ran the length for the United Kingdom one time. So I ran 999 miles in 36 days, doing an ultra marathon a day, sleeping at the side of the road. And I'd really respected ultra runners saying, no, you shouldn't do that. You need to train for this. You need a specialist medical team. You need a nutritionist. And I'm like, no, fuck off. I didn't even do any training ever. I just got a flight to John O'Groats. My compass pointed south. I went, right, let's go. And, what's the worst that's going to happen? You've got a mobile phone. You've got a bank card.
Yeah.
I had my tent and my safety equipment on my back. Worst thing could happen was I'd have to flag down a car and say, look, I've got myself in a bit of trouble here. Could you give me a lift to the next town? And I actually did that at one point. I had to hitchhike back on myself a bit due to the weather. But have you experienced that, Amy? The negativity, I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember going into the shops to buy equipment for these big mountains, and I was going with my now husband, and everyone in the shop assumed that it was him that was going to be doing all of this. So they started bringing out all this stuff, and I was like, no, actually it's for me. And they were just looking at me in like complete disbelief, like, no, you're not going to be the one doing this. I said, yeah. But then not only that, they didn't have any equipment for women. Nothing, women do have different bodies, different requirements, different needs. And there was nothing, it was buy men's stuff or there's nothing for you. In fact, I had to get my summit suit. Nims sourced it for me from China because there are quite a few Chinese women or, sort of mountaineering programs. It's been a bit more established over there, because they have obviously the mountains on their doorstep. And so I had to get sort of specialist equipment but all of it is sort of these barriers that get put up. And if I hadn't been quite so determined, might quite easily have sort of put me off. And even when I was writing Breathless, or when the book came out, people, would read it and sometimes question how accurate it was. Especially because I say that my main character, she trains for the big mountain just by going up and down Box Hill, which is the only hill in London, basically, of any decent size. So literally to climb to summit Manaslu, all the training that I did was I took the train out to Box Hill and I walked up and down that until I felt like I couldn't do it anymore. Some days that was 5 times. I think the most times I did it was maybe 10 times, and then I was exhausted. And I would sort of carry water bottles which I would fill up at the stream at the bottom of Box Hill so I had some weight on my back as I went uphill, and then I would empty it out, and so downhill was a bit easier. And then but that was all the training I did was Box Hill. I didn't go out to the Alps. I did do one session in Snowdonia where I learned about where I learned how to use the Ascender device and all of the kind of more technical mountaineering equipment. And again, that was with John Gupta, who was this very experienced mountaineer, and that's where I kind of absorbed as much information as possible. And obviously I did lots of reading and things about it, but I wasn't like one of these people who was out there in the Scottish winters, training for the brutal conditions that I was there to face. I just did what was possible, and I was also, I still had my life to live. I still had to fund it, so I was still writing. I still had to, do all of the everyday stuff. So you kind of fitting these expeditions around that. It's not the sole way that I make my living. I'm not lucky enough to do that, but. Yeah, so I think I faced a little bit of imposter syndrome as well sometimes there. But and yeah, people who sort of said that I couldn't do it, but I also had people who were who didn't laugh at me. That's what I think was really important, and Nims was one of them. John Gupta was one of them. They took it seriously, but they didn't ever say to me, "Oh, I don't believe you can do it," or anything. They like, no, they said you can do it if you put if you've got the right mindset. You put in the time to get your equipment right. You stay focused. You will be able to do it. And I remember when we got to Camp 3 of Manaslu, that was the first time we would start to use oxygen, a little bit of oxygen, and sort of I'd practiced wearing an oxygen mask before, but I'd never kind of used it properly. And I found it quite suffocating. It was actually very hot because as I say, you're in the summit suit, the sun is beating down on you. You've got it reflecting off all the snow all around you. So I was sweating and I had this mask on. I was like almost hyperventilating. I was feeling quite claustrophobic. Um, and I remember Nims just like stopping me, and he said, this is the first time you've done this. He's like, it's okay, just take a moment, like take it in, like, we just give yourself a bit of a break. And he's like, and then one foot in front of the other, like, we're gonna get up this hill, we're gonna do this, like, but just calm down, this is all new to you. This is the learning experience of being on these big mountains. And we're gonna get you through this. And I think that was so helpful to me, because I was ready to say to him, just leave me at Camp 3. I'm not going up any further. I'm finished. And he said, no, we're going to try as much as you can. If you really need to go back down, okay. And then by the time I got to Camp 4, I have this video that I took of myself at Camp 4 where I turn around and I just said, I'm here. I can't believe it. I've done it. I'm almost at the summit. I was certain I was going to make the summit at that point because the hardest bit was done. And I just said that I just thought, I was this close to giving up. I was so close to giving up. And I'm just so glad that I didn't. And that I just, accepted the difficulty, because it was difficult. At times it felt impossible, but, just taking even just one more step, one more step, one more step. it got me there. And I ended up having, one of the most incredible experiences of my life. So yeah, worth it.
Amazing. I've already figured out my Everest training is going to be done on the stair climber in the gym.
Yeah. Yeah.
It just feels so. It really feels like stepping up those
Yeah.
you know
I
foot
stuck.
those foot. What's the word I'm looking for? You know where you put you can see the person in front of you where their feet
Yeah,
have been in the snow. It really.
absolutely.
And the other thing as well, my buddy Mitch has just done the longest climb of Everest.
Oh, right. Yes.
He swam the English
I
Channel,
saw that. Yeah.
cycled to Nepal, and then ran up Everest with his Sherpa. And
Well, I
he's
think Galjan was his Sherpa, and
yes,
that was my Sherpa for Manaslu as well. But he
oh,
was in
amazing!
the team at that point.
What a small world, isn't it? That we're all
Tiny world.
connected.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, and Mitch was saying, and also I'm chatting with this Polish lad that the Polish lad did it my way. He picked let's just say a reasonable expedition company, not one of the big expensive ones, and I watched his video. He videoed all of it, including this summit, and they went up on their own. There was no one else around. I don't know how they did it, but he was going up with the rope teams as well, helping the Sherpas wherever he could. He went to 8,000 meters without oxygen, this Polish lad.
Amazing.
And when he summited, you could tell it must have been a bit edgy because he was snow bit all over his face. It was, the wind must have been kicking up a bit. But Mitch said it was scalding hot. It was t-shirt weather most of the way until the higher camps. And then he said that they'd come up to him and said there's a window now right after the ropes had just been put in. So we're going in the morning. And he was like, whoa, oh my
Yeah.
God, I thought I was going to be hanging around here for months.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be the first person to summit this season. And that was it. They summited on their own. And I'm really that's my, I don't know how much say you have in these things. And obviously I'm the Sherpas know best, but
Yeah.
that would be my ideal scenario, was just getting a sneaky weather window and getting up there quickly and back down. Is when we rode the Atlantic, we had an app called Windy. It was amazing. It could tell you the wind accurately up to 11 days in advance. And you literally knew if you had, say, 3 days with no wind, which was awful, and it did happen, or
Yeah.
really minor wind, you could say, right, Tuesday afternoon, 2:30, wind's going to change to 15 knots. Then it's 2 hours later, it's going to be 80. And it exactly was, Amy. I was just wondering if you saw any of that technology.
I mean, Everest is its own beast. There's a specific weather station that gets set up just for Everest, and I think pretty much all the base camp teams receive the same forecast at once. When on Manaslu, we were reliant on Mountain Forecast, which is again just a website. It was fairly accurate. We did have to wait quite a while. It was a bit frustrating for a weather window. We also were waiting for Nims, who had gone off to summit Cho Oyu, which is another mountain. He'd had an opportunity to kind of go off and check off one of his 14 and then come back, and obviously we were waiting for him. So there were other factors at play, but there definitely is Everest is well, because Everest now is so, I mean, as you, I'm sure you know, there's just so many teams on there. It's becoming it has become its own beast. There are people doing quick quick summits, for having just landed summit, go back, fly home, kind of thing, having trained for the altitude at home in hypoxia chambers and things like that, or using different drugs or booster things to kind of get them to the top. So it is its own, but I don't know personally. I mean, but again, it's been 6 years since I've been on the mountains, and it's changed so much since even in that time. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think the base camp itself is like a miniature city. So you'll find people with all of the top technology. You have people flying in pizza from Kathmandu, arriving by helicopter. You get all sorts on the mountain, which is one of the amazing things about it. I mean, it's one of the things that also as a writer brings me back to these places because the kind of people that you meet, the reasons why people are doing things, which can be so varied. It's very different when you go to the Marathon des Sables. It feels like everyone has like a really pretty compelling story as to why they're there, what's driving them, their why, their reason for being there. In the mountains, in the high mountains, it's slightly different. You get a lot of ego on the mountain, a lot of big CEOs or former professional athletes, a lot of ex-military, people who are really kind of wanting to leave a legacy or make their mark.
Wankers, you mean?
Yeah, a few wankers, yeah. And especially, being a woman on her own in those environments can be very uncomfortable, quite often. But again, you kind of have to take care of yourself when you're out there. But the characters, they draw me back.
Yes, I'm sure you've incorporated this in your book. There's that thing, this, God, human behavior is so transparent sometimes.
Yeah.
And already I've had people say to me, well, what do you want to climb Everest for? Why don't you climb K2? I'm like, maybe because I don't fucking want to climb K2. Is that, do I have a say in what I do with my life? Thank you very. There's so much silliness around it, snobbery.
Yeah.
Had someone the other day lecture me that I've got to bring, all my rubbish down. Well, yeah, of course, because it's the law now in Nepal. But even if it wasn't, and I'm not suggesting, do this, but hang on a sec, didn't you just fly to Thailand for your holiday and you burnt all that carbon? And where do you think your recycling goes? It just gets put in, most of it gets put into landfill. I mean, yes, Everest is a beautiful mountain and it's revered and it's obviously respected as a goddess by at least 3 nations. But it's just funny, people get on their high horse about it. And it's really simple with me. I was aware of Everest as a child because my dad read the Chris Bonington books. Mm-hmm. And even my dad, who doesn't say a lot about a lot, was like, these guys are this mountain is special. These guys are... And then I read a book. It was about 1998-ish, and it was about the disaster up there. It wasn't Krakau's Into Thin Air. It was written by a chap called, I believe he's called Matt Dickinson. And he'd set out to film a very famous English TV guy, Brian Blessed, on his 3rd attempt to climb Everest. And there's actually a documentary made about it. And Brian, he was struggling on the trek to base camp. It was clear he was going to be a liability to his Sherpas and anyone else. And so they pulled the plug on him. He graciously accepted it. But then they didn't have a documentary to make, of course. So they turned to Matt, who was like the director or the cameraman or something. They said, why don't we make it about you? So he ended up unintentionally summiting Everest and coming back down on the very night where all those 10 or 12 people perished.
Wow.
And even reading that, I'm like, I've got to do this, The way he talked about, he came back now, he was absolutely spent. They got back down to Camp 4 and crashed in a tent. He was talking about someone had already been in his tent, half the food was missing, everything was like smashed up. And I was like, yeah, I get that it's a struggle, it's life and death up there, and it's that simple. And even as a father, and when I rode the Atlantic, Amy, I was like, the next thing I want to do is with my family. That's more important to me now. But obviously, Everest, you can't take your family up there. and it really is, you know, it's not something that you do lightly. It's like you said, what do? Do I stop living my life because I could, well, you know, the potential for something to go wrong is there. I don't have that attitude. I go, it's not going to happen to me. You know, it's just not. I'm not dropping out a marathon to Sables. No, I'm going to finish it. It's fine. I'll row the Atlantic. Just watch me. No, I haven't done all that training. And, you know, the thing that pissed me off the most rowing the Atlantic was the number of people that either went out and bought a rowing machine or asked me if I had one. No, I bloody haven't. I hate the things. And why do you want to go on a rowing machine when you're rowing a boat? It's just like two different things, right? So, yes, as you can probably tell, I'm sort of a bit internally exasperated with bloody do-gooders that want to tell you how you should live your life based on their beliefs, sort of thing. If people want to say, is it environmentally friendly to climb a mountain? No, of course it's not. It's shit. The carbon footprint, the crappy kit that you're probably going to buy and only use once, etc., etc. But, you know, when the whole world's going to Sodom and Gomorrah anyway, I don't know if that's... I don't know. Is it selfish? Yeah, I guess it is. I guess in many aspects it is. But it's also, as you know, Amy, isn't it? It's phenomenally incredible to have lived your life.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Right. I'm conscious of the time. Before we come on and talk about your writing.
Sure.
Antarctica.
Oh, yeah.
Did you fall off the edge of the flat Earth?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how you've felt about it, but Antarctica really took me by surprise. I I didn't know. I kind of went really last minute. It wasn't like a big long planned thing for me. I was in Argentina doing this, sort of circumnavigation of South America and had the opportunity while I was in Ushuaia to get on an expedition ship and head down there. It was at a vastly discounted rate, and it was sort of felt again like an opportunity that I couldn't pass up. And at the time, this was with my first husband, who decided that he didn't want to come to Antarctica, so that what didn't interest him, and it was the kind of first moment between us where I thought, oh, we're not the same. We don't have the same vision for what our lives are going to be like. You don't want to come to Antarctica, and that seems very bizarre to me, but make your own choices.
You got
Anyways,
you seriously got to question anyone that doesn't love penguins. I
yeah,
mean,
I
come
was
on.
exactly. Anyway, I was shocked, and I ended up I had this moment where I was sort of standing on the bow of the ship, and it was kind of pulling away from the continent, heading into this unknown, and just thinking, oh my God, there is this sort of separation, both literal and kind of spiritual, I don't know, emotional happening at this point in time. Although, I didn't realize that my marriage was going to shortly end after that, but it was definitely a big realization for me that there was something between us. And then I kind of turned my focus to Antarctica, and I was just blown away, absolutely blown away by everything I saw there. I mean, talking about wonders of the world, I always feel, I grew up on adventure stories, on adventure books, novels, both real and imagined. And it felt like kind of true frontier, I suppose. And the wildlife, I was blown away. I didn't realize, I always thought of it was, and obviously the deep Antarctica is desolate, but the parts that you see when you come, into the peninsula are teeming with life, and I had no idea. I wish I could have gone scuba diving. I would have loved that. Sounds incredible. Were you able to see much?
Yeah, it was I mean, when I say yeah, what I mean is, it was more the experience of doing
Yeah.
something that you love in such an extreme environment that you never thought in your life you would get to do
Oh, I
this,
can imagine.
and
Yeah.
using such advanced equipment with professional. I mean, I was probably the most least no, I wasn't the least experienced. The Japanese girl obviously, for some reason, didn't have the required experience, obviously, and there was an American girl, and she panicked and came up upside down with air in her feet, which was, the feet of her suit, which is just a big no. You need to know how to rectify that, right?
Mm.
But it was just the fact you're diving along and your buddy taps you on the shoulder and points, and you look and there's two penguins swimming alongside you. We dived up to a Ukrainian research base. The idea being, we did the dive by the research base, then we went back to the ship, took our kit off, and we went and had drinks at the research base. And as we dived up to this research base, we started to see all these skeletons on the floor, and they looked like dogs. And I was tapping my dive buddy, what? And then we realized that they'd been eating the seals. They were like sea lions. That's what the research base had obviously been eating them, which is, I'm, not making a judgment here. It was just, when you understand the what's the word, the laws down there for protecting the environment. I mean, we weren't allowed to take certain stuff. We had to our boots every time. So
sterilize everything.
Yes, but just going back to what I was saying at the beginning, I'm just sort of chuckling there because I know, I think two people now I know that have skied all the way across Antarctica. A chap called Borge Ausland, this crazy Norwegian explorer. He just rocked up down there on a yacht with his mates. He hopped across onto Antarctica, put up a kite, and he kite skied all the way across and got his mates to pick him up at the other side. One person I'm proud to call my friend is the Serrano Fines, the greatest living explorer, and he has circumnavigated the whole planet in a line, so sort of straight down through Africa, across to Antarctica, crossed Antarctica, gone back up, and it's funny. I think I've been the first person, Amy, to ask these guys, "Are you aware of the flat Earth theory?" And they've all replied, "No, what?" And I've said, there's this theory that the world's like a flat plane, and all to a T, they've gone, "Fuck off." And it's because they're not like in the internet world I live in. They do they're not aware of the narratives and stuff.
Flat earthers, yeah.
And it just makes me chuckle that I've lived, worked, and traveled in 86 countries across all 7 continents. I've sat on many places on the globe with no light pollution and watched the satellites tracking over. I've obviously navigated across the Atlantic Ocean using GPS and a traditional map, not a flat Earth map, but a traditional map. I've seen that the curvature of the Earth, because when you see traffic at sea, you see the top of it first. So you're literally guessing for half an hour, what the hell is it? All you see is a little tip of a mast or a radio antenna, and gradually it comes into view. Then you see 3 masts and you think, oh my God, is there a flotilla of pirates coming towards us? And then you realize what it is. No, it's an oil tanker with the, that superstructure that they have. And the way they move, because it's a globe, it's not the way that you can hardly tell which direction they're going in because of the sort of dynamics of it all. And the point I'm getting to is then I get someone to tell me that, Chris, you really need to look into flat Earth theory. And what can you say? You know, what can you say? And I just wondered if people had said that to you. No, you can't go down there. It's like, yeah, anyone can go down there. You know, Borge Ausland is case in point.
Yeah, no, thankfully, no, I haven't had anyone say that to me, but I am aware of flat Earth theory and have heard of it, but I haven't, yeah, find it difficult to to engage.
Yeah. So your writing then, how did you do? You've always been a reader. I think that makes a good writer, does it not?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, I think reading obviously gives you that sort of um, basic idea of how to tell a good story and kind of gives you that foundation. And it helps because I have to read a lot all the time for work. So it's a good thing that it's something that I enjoy. But yeah, I mean, I've been a pretty big reader since childhood, mostly kind of science fiction and fantasy. So I think there's something in especially science fiction and fantasy as well, but something in that kind of lends itself well to the kind of explorer, adventurer side of things and curiosity about the world and what's out there.
And how did you land a deal with Penguin? Because that's no mean feat.
Yeah, well, so published my first novel in 2013. That was with Random House. So before Penguin and Random House merged, Random House was another big publisher. And I'd been writing for children pretty much exclusively since that point, up until Breathless. And what happened there is I sort of had this good solid career, I would say, writing for young adults. Nothing kind of too outrageously brilliant or anything, but enough to sustain me and enough to provide me with some income to do these adventures and things. But when it came to Breathless, it was so totally different to anything I'd written before that I wrote the whole thing, without telling anyone really that I was doing it. So I had this idea for a kind of murder mystery, sort of Agatha Christie, but set on a big mountain, and because of it kind of aligned with my personal story, I thought that there was quite a good kind of personal hook and obviously story hook there. So I have a literary agent, so she's someone who represents me to publishers, various publishers. And when the book was ready, it went out to a wide range of publishers all across London, and ended up in a situation where we had a couple of publishers bidding for it, and Penguin ended up being the ones who kind of gave me the most compelling pitch for how they would publish the book, and everything. So, and of course they also bought the book in the US as well and in Canada, and it's been translated into I think 18 different languages as well. So it's really been
Gosh.
yeah my biggest success and has sort of led in to writing more of these thrillers. Say Girl on the Ice, which is Antarctica based, and then Runner 13, which is ultra running in the Sahara. And then next year I have Free Fall, which is the skydiving thriller. So
Amazing.
yeah.
Did you? Yeah, I wrote a fiction series. My first one, first in the series, is called The Drift, and it. I'm writing I'd written my first memoir by then, and when it came on to Drift, I thought I wrote this really, really clever book with these intertwining sort of plots, but I almost think it was probably a bit too clever because I don't, you know, I think it went over a lot of people's heads, is what I'm saying,
Cool.
and that's not a fault of the book because I didn't want to write a book that everyone went, oh yeah, no, great. Anyway, the second in the series, which is called The Trade. My God, Amy, I honestly felt like I had nailed. I'm not trying to big
Yeah.
myself up. I'm just talking about the incredible phenomena of writing,
Yeah.
of which I encourage anybody to write something. Right. The second one, I felt like I'd written the epitome of a thriller. It was bloody good. The last line in it was just, oh yes, yes, oh just that. So, did you kind of? did you try at this quite a lot to get good, or did you find that you was pretty bang on from the start?
Um, well, I mean, I like a lot of writers who start out, I did my when I wrote my first novel, I faced a lot of rejection. Um, Probably, I don't know, upwards of 100 rejections. This is from literary agents. So I wanted to be traditionally published by one of the big houses. So normally to do that, you have to get a literary agent interested in your work, first of all. And that normally requires writing a sort of short letter where you describe kind of the plot of your book roughly and a little bit about who you are and maybe the first three chapters. So sometimes if you've written a brilliant last line, they don't even get to read that. They only see the very beginning, and then you kind of wait for them to respond to you. And at first, it was just rejection after rejection. So I obviously wasn't doing something right. And I kind of took a bit of time off from it, and obviously I just graduated from university. I needed to make money somehow, so I needed a proper job. So I kind of got a job. But I always had this book kind of percolating in the background, sort of nattering at me like, "Don't give up on me yet. Don't give up on me." And I happened to go do a big after graduation. I did a big trip where I went to Africa, did traveled from Kenya to South Africa, visited, deserts and uh, all this different terrains. Just had my eyes opened basically to the world, and came back after that and rewrote the novel from scratch. So with the same core idea, but just totally with this new experience in mind. And what resulted from that was obviously a much stronger book, which then did land me a literary agent, and then the deal with Random House. But the deal with Random House was for just under £5,000, so it wasn't anything that was going to, sustain me trying to live in London and start a life in England. I'd moved from Canada at that point. So it was still a side hustle, just a thing I was doing as a hobby that I love to do. Um, but it wasn't making me any money, and it took me until about book 4 or 5 that when I finally started making some enough money that I could consider leaving the day job. And I thought, if I don't leave the day job, I might regret never giving the writing a proper go. So I decided to make the leap and do that. And I thought at the time that I had this relative safety net because I married someone who was working in finance. So if I felt like if nothing sold, I had a bit of a, he could help support me until I could get another job. But then of course that all went away. And I was sort of left on my own, but I was still able to keep kind of generating ideas, keep writing, and keep kind of climbing I haven't had I'm, feel very privileged and lucky in my career right now, but it has taken, it's been a long, slow rise. I've published a book a year. I think Runner 13 is book number 12. So I've been publishing a book a year for 12 years. So it's been slow and steady, but now I'm in this great position where, the writing enables me to go out and do these kind of things. I'm not tied to an office or a base. I can, work from anywhere. And that's what I really try and take advantage of. And I get to do what I love for a living. And I love fiction. People always ask me if I'm going to write a memoir, having done all of these things. And I'm sure maybe in the future it might happen, but at the moment, I love taking kind of people that I meet, the kind of characters, the central ideas, and the things that I learn while mountaineering or running or anything like that, but then taking them to a different kind of level, which fiction allows you to do. So it kind of opens up the possibilities, and you can really kind of take those plot lines to their extreme and not risk offending anyone. So, but hopefully deliver a really compelling story. Because I don't know if you go into a bookstore at the moment, if you walk into a Waterstones or a Barnes and Noble, you'll look at the thriller shelf and it'll be packed. So many books to choose from, so many authors writing, so many people doing it. But I want people to know that if they choose an Amy McCulloch book, there is that hint of authenticity. There is that touch of experience that I've done the things that my characters have gone through. And I think that's my unique selling point when it comes to my writing because, yeah, I've been there, I've lived it. And that's sort of what I try and get across, while also telling like a page turning story.
Yeah, they say all the best fiction's based in fact. Or
Yeah. Well, and often, honestly, the truth is probably stranger than you can get away with, more in the truth, than you can in fiction. Fiction has to make sense, and often the reality doesn't make sense a lot of times. But
and just a personal question: how is it working with an editor? Have you sort of clashed at all, or are they generally quite good?
well, for the first time with Breathless, and I've had the same editors for all my thrillers, the American team and the British team and the Canadian team all bought the book at the same time. So I ended up with three editors who all wanted to feed back on the book, and they all had a sort of equal investment in the book. So it was really interesting. I would have these, most of the time as an author, you work with one editor. There'll be a primary editor. So whoever buys the book first normally. If you're in Britain, it's normally the British editor who takes the lead, and the Americans and everyone else just kind of takes it when it's finished. However, but for me, in my case, I had all three feeding back, and that was one of the most challenging but also rewarding, I think, professional experiences I've had, because they were all very experienced editors, and the best editors never tell you what to do to change your book. They'll just tell you, what they feel like isn't quite working for them or hasn't quite hit the mark. And it's really down to you to figure out what it is that you need to do to change that. They'll never be prescriptive. They'll never try and take over your words or anything, but they'll say, you know what, I wasn't quite convinced by that plot line, or that character, needs a bit of work or something like that. And sometimes they didn't agree, but it was up to me to kind of figure out what it was, why they weren't agreeing, sort of if someone felt something was strong and someone thought it was weak, what can I do to convince the person who thought it was weak to make it better? So it was difficult. But Chris, I love to do difficult things. And it was very rewarding at the end, because they all three of them really just wanted me to produce the best book possible. And the result is, evident for me in the kind of reception and the sales and the reviews that have kind of come out after that. So it's quite nice, because writing is quite an isolating profession, and it is very personal, obviously. You spend a lot of time alone working on these books. And so to have people who are so invested in your characters, in your plot, um, willing to kind of battle it out with you, or, figure it out with you, is really gratifying. And they are responsible as well for, the success of it as it goes out into the world. Because as an author, apart from the publicity and the talking to people and telling as many people as you can about the book, really it's out of your hands. It's up to the sales teams and the people who get it on the shelf to kind of sell it for you. So I feel really lucky to have a great team in Penguin, in the UK, with Doubleday in the US, and it's Penguin in Canada as well. So
Incredible. Yes, you've done really well. I mean,
thank
it's a
you.
big pat on the back, isn't it, to be up there with the best of the rest, with the biggest publishers. So, last question then, Amy. Next adventure, what you did hint a bit there. Is it the Atlantic you've got your sights on, or?
That is what I have set my sights on. So I am 34 weeks pregnant right now. So it will be probably, I'm looking a couple of years ahead, but and because you do it over Christmas, New Year, don't you? Normally, that's the best time of
Yes.
year to do it. So it definitely won't be this year, but I might have my eye on trying to do it another time. But something else I'm interested in is, obviously being Canadian. I would love to go up into the Northern Territories and perhaps do one of the canoe trips, river trips that go through the Canadian wilderness. That's something that really appeals to me, and I have a couple of friends who have done that, or who do it, who run trips up there for a living, and the adventures and kind of isolation, wilderness, and kind of beauty that they experience up there really appeals to me as well. So something on the
Sounds
water.
amazing. Yeah, there's also in oh gosh, I think it's somewhere in Lapland. I'm not sure, but there's quite a big ski trek.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's done over the course of, I don't know, let's just say 10 days or whatever, and you have to carry your equipment in a poke, so a sledge, and I think you
I get
camp overnight and stuff. That one really appeals to me.
amazing. I'm going to look into that.
Yeah, yeah. Brilliant. Amy, you've been absolutely wonderful. It's been great talking to you and exchanging ideas and stuff.
Likewise, thank you so much for inviting me on the show. It's been
No
great.
problem. Wish you all the best with your book. We were obviously going to put a link below the podcast. We'll put your social media links. I'd encourage everyone to follow Amy, folks, because she's certainly inspirational.
Thank you.
And stay on the line, Amy, just so I can thank you when I hit the button off. But friends at home, thanks for watching another episode of the Bought the T-Shirt podcast. If you could like and subscribe, if indeed you did like it, that would be awesome. And a massive thank you to the people that support me on Locals, the people that support my Patreon, or the people that have very kindly just become YouTube members. Really, really appreciated. That's it. Much love. See you soon.